Hello, queers. Welcome back to the podcast. I just want to say before starting this episode that I kind of headcanon all of our viewers as queer because Mel and I are both queer. And if you're not, just don't say anything because I won't believe you.
Yeah, we're
Anyways,
silencing you actually. So
yeah. Were you silent or silenced?
let's put that meme to rest.
I'm sorry. Anyways, in the next month that after we record this, it'll be our podcast anniversary, our 2-year podcast anniversary. And Mel thought about what if we ranked every show, movie, shorts, and pilots that we've ever reviewed on the podcast. So we're going to do that. We're going to post 3 episodes. The first one is going to be, I think, ranking all the shorts and pilots. So yeah, watch out for that. Our anniversary date is August 24th, I believe. Anyways, let's just get started with ranking all the shorts and pilots. So the first pilot we're going to talk about is Has-Been Hotel. From what I remember, Has-Been Hotel was a bit all over the place when it came to the plot and pacing. I did find the characters interesting, but now that I think about it, I find the main character Charlie to be very dull compared to the rest of the cast, and I do think it's a problem when the main character is the least interesting. I think that if the pilot followed a different main character, it could be better. I still found this pilot okay. I will say I liked it better when I first watched it compared to now because I've learned a few things about the pilot and this franchise, I guess, that I'm just not really the biggest fan of it anymore.
Have you seen any of the spoilers for the show?
Yes, I have.
Okay. I have as well. I heard someone talk about it and I think it made me hate the show even more. I haven't watched it.
No, I haven't watched it either.
But I think it made me hate the pilot even more, which is
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you because that's what I was struggling with. Should I rank it based on what I think now or what I thought at first by the pilot by itself? Because now I have so much more context for the pilot. So I was a bit struggling a bit with that. So I decided to give this a C overall because I think I still enjoyed it somewhat as a pilot by itself, but looking back on it now with more context, I just don't love it that much.
Okay. Well, should I say my ranking first? I think I ranked it a D, Marco. This is one of the D's that I ranked.
Yeah, you
Um,
mentioned that.
I didn't like it before I learned more about the show. I just don't think I like Vivzy Pop. The aesthetic, the vibes of it, it reminds me very much of 12-year-old Tumblr humor. And I just feel like I've ascended past that and I no longer like this. And I feel like the way they talk about the topics and stuff, it feels really insincere. It feels a little bit insensitive. It has also culminated a fan base that I'm not a fan of and I really don't want to touch or be around at all. I personally am going to allow what I know now to affect my official ranking, which is why I ranked it a D. I honestly think the only things I liked from the pilot was the character Katie Killjoy and Sir Pentious.
I will also say it's excessively edgy to a point where it's just too much. There's way too much cursing, and I don't mind cursing. I just feel like it felt like an edgy 12-year-old boy wrote this, you know?
Actually, I would say an edgy 12-year-old Tumblr girl.
Oh yeah, definitely. It just felt excessive at points. Like there are characters who are dying left and right, like in the pilot, but they weren't important at all. Like nothing felt substantial. It's just not that great of a pilot.
Oh, I should also say it's like a musical show, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so I think it also gets docked points for that as well.
Yeah, you do not like musical shows, as you
I do
mentioned
not.
before.
Okay, next one is Infinity Train. I gave this one an S tier, mostly because ever since when I first watched this years ago on youtube.com, I was in love with it. What I love so much about this pilot is the premise is in and of itself is so interesting. They introduce you just enough to these characters. They give you just enough of everything for you to be like, this is such an interesting world that I would love to explore and to see where they would go with this and what everything is about. Overall, it's an amazing pilot.
I also agree with you. This is an amazing pilot. I will say the pilot is just an episode from the actual show with just a bit different of an art style. So the pilot pretty much is just like copy paste from the show, which I'm not a huge fan of. Like it's
Well,
literally I think
the other
episode
way
3.
around.
Yeah, good point. Good point. But despite that, there's so many questions this pilot leaves you on, and I think the concept is really amazing as well. The characters in this pilot really stand out from my memory. The main characters are Atticus, Fun One, and Tulip, who all have pretty good dynamics. And this is a pretty amazing pilot, and I just love the the intrigue that leaves you on by the end, and I also gave this an S rank. Okay, the next pilot is Clicker. I think this is actually a short film. So Clicker is a short film about a non-functional gay relationship, and I think this short film does a beautiful job exploring the idea. The ending of the short film made me feel really satisfied, and I also found the jokes in this short film to be actually pretty funny, which is not something I agree with when it comes to most media I read or watch. I also love the concept of the main character's remote control sending them to this weird TV world. This is by far my favorite short film and pilot, so I rank this S as well.
Yes, I also rank this an S. Just everything you said. It is just a solid short film. And that's also what I appreciate about short films versus pilots, is that they are telling you a complete story. And I think the time that they had, they did really well with that story. I think it was an interesting story. I loved how it ended not happily. It wasn't a happily ever after, but it was the healthiest ending, which I really appreciate. And I really did love the changing of realities and the different art styles. Okay, our next, I think this was a pilot. Welcome to Hell. I think this just was okay. I think this was just an okay pilot. I think this started off as an art project, and I think the creator is creating another episode of this at some point. I think the plot was pretty interesting. I think the idea of like a ghost's job to be like, hey, I need you to kill yourself. It's a pretty interesting one, but I just don't think I was necessarily that interested in it in general. So I gave it a C.
Okay, this was another one that I kind of struggled with placing because, unlike every other pilot, this pilot I actually watched when I was a child, and I watched multiple times when I was a child, so I'm really attached to it. So it is a pretty old pilot. I've always found this pilot pretty interesting and enjoyable. However, I don't really love it that much anymore. Like you said, like the plot is interesting. I just don't really love where it's going so far because it feels like it's going to be very repetitive so far. But I still found it pretty strong overall, so I ranked it a B. Okay, the next pilot is Welcome to My Life. This pilot is about a monster boy and his life at school. It has a mockumentary format, and the animation style / art style kind of reminds me a lot of The Amazing World of Gumball, which is a huge plus for me because I really love that entire style that's in The Amazing World of Gumball. Despite this pilot being pretty good, it's not one that I find myself revisiting a lot, and I forget about it a lot. I still think it's a good story, it just isn't that memorable. So I don't know if I would put this in a B or a C. For now, I'm putting it at B because I think it's still good, but it's probably going to be a C eventually.
Okay, that's interesting you say that. I ranked this an S. Mostly because it did remind me of The Amazing World of Gumball, which I love. I do love when creators implement real life with animation, and I loved the chill vibes of it. I guess you'd call this a slice of life pilot. And I don't. This was also something that I watched when I was a kid. It was so magical when I watched it as a kid, and even as an adult, I have this fondness to it. I love how slow paced it is. I also love the message of the show, and also just the little details in it. I think I mentioned in our review that I really liked how the pictures they have of the house they live in looks like people actually live in it, which I really loved. Overall, it's just a cute little pilot. I love it so much. Now it's time for everyone's favorite gay dads. The Rhino and the Red Bill. Was this a short or a pilot? I don't
I
remember.
think it was a pilot.
Okay. I ranked this a B. I think there was a lot to like about it, especially the two main characters. I think the plot of it was pretty interesting. I didn't like how they used the hyenas. I just feel like it's sort of overplayed to be like, oh, the hyenas are the bad guys and they're also really dumb and oh, they make the weird laugh. But other than that, I think the action scenes were really great. I loved the sentimental scenes we had between the two main characters. I'm a really big fan of gay rights, so that was really nice to see.
I will say, despite you finding the hyenas being annoying as the villains, I actually really liked the hyenas dialogue. You mentioned this during our review of this pilot, that one of them was talking about, I called dibs on eating this character's arm or something like that. I kind of forgot what exactly the character said, but that mention was just really funny to me and you, so I like that aspect of it. The only real thing I really remember about this pilot is that during our review of this, we talked about how we shipped the two main characters in this pilot. Well, maybe we didn't straight up ship them, but we did both agree they were our gay lovers. We even titled the episode "The Rhino and the Red Bill Are Gay Lovers," and we capitalized the word "are," which is just so funny to me. Anyways, I also remember this pilot being pretty good. There was a lot of action that I enjoyed, and the jokes landed, in my opinion. One of the main characters is also blind, and I really enjoyed that representation. I do remember complaining about the dialogue audio audio being low compared to the rest of the audio, but I still enjoyed this nonetheless, and I ended up ranking this AA. The next pilot is the modifiers. This one I do remember finding to just be okay. I definitely do like it, but it's not something I'm really attached to at all. I also remember not really liking the rat character, and the ending was intriguing, so I ended up ranking this as C.
I remember you hating the rat. Oh yeah, his name was just Rat. Okay. I did like this pilot. I just really loved the characters. I think each of them were really interesting and the dynamics they had with each other. I think the way they set it up would make it really easy for it to be like this episodic show, as well as sort of having this maybe underlying plot of the agent trying to figure out who her parents were or something. There was some sort of cliffhanger with her parents, and that would obviously have been the premise for the entire show. But I feel like what we were given really set up what could be a really interesting show that I definitely would have watched as a kid. I gave it an A. I think it had a lot to do with the fact that I loved Rat. The next one is Hugo's Mind Palace. I'm pretty sure I only had good things to say about this pilot. I literally loved everything. I loved the characters. I loved the plot, like the setup of the whole show. I thought that was really interesting. I loved the way they like dimension hopped where it was a zipper. That was really cool. One thing that I really loved was how much effort it looked like the backgrounds were given. There were Easter eggs and there were just silly little things in there that you can rewatch over and over again and find something and be like, okay, that's really funny. I genuinely don't think there was anything I hated about this show, so I give it an S.
I will say I also find it funny what we called this episode. We called it Who Made Hugo British and Hugo's Mind Palace. Also just a really funny title.
I think I should say I did point out that he was British, but I think he was chill British. Like, something about his accent, it wasn't offensive to me personally. So
Okay.
I think he's one of the good British ones.
Yeah, one of the good ones. Okay, I see where you're going with this. I'm going to be honest with you. This one I thought was just okay. I remember specifically being annoyed at the ending because it seemed like the ending would be way more interesting than what we got in the pilot. I get that sometimes shows have to start off slow before getting to the better parts, but when making a pilot, you should definitely have like the best parts come up first. I just didn't think what we got was the best parts, in my opinion. And I know you disagree with me, but
I'm gonna have to tell you that you're wrong.
okay. Well, I think you're wrong, so
Oh my gosh. This
sorry.
this podcast is tearing us apart.
I'm not sure if I like the humor in this one. I don't really remember it that much. I think I did find some parts funny and some parts not really my thing. But yeah, this one I just don't really love that much, and I gave it a C. Okay, the next one is The Legend of Pee Pee. This short film is short but sweet. There is barely any dialogue, but it manages to be a pretty funny story in a really short time. I still find this short to be funny even after rewatching it, and I love the ending where Pee Pee ends up like taking the dragon monster back to the kingdom, and like there's like this huge rampage that goes on, and in the end, Pee Pee is just like putting their fingers together like in a shy way to try to flirt with the dragon thing. So I gave this an A. Don't start laughing because I will judge you.
So I think that if you want to know exactly how I feel about this short, you should just watch our episode of The Legend of
Wow, you're literally such a child.
I think you should just watch that episode so you know how I feel about this short. All I'll say is I gave it an S. I think it's very obvious why I gave it an S. It was an amazing short. And that's all I can say without cracking up. Okay, so our next one is Lackadaisy. I gave this one a D just because this is tough. Okay, so do I think it belongs with Has-Been Hotel? I'm starting to consider that maybe I should have bumped Has-Been Hotel down to F. The only thing that I really liked about it was the animation, and I think that some of the character interactions were promising, but I just don't see myself getting into this if it were to become a show. And I think one of the characters, the crackhead raccoon guy, I forgot his name, he was so off-putting as a character that I mentioned that even if I loved every single one of the other characters, I don't think they'd be able to carry him and make me like the show. So that's why I put it in the D. In D. Don't say in the D.
I was gonna mention it, the way you said that. So Lackadaisy is one of those pilots that just isn't for me. It's historical fiction, which I'm not the biggest fan of, and the Prohibition era isn't that interesting to me either. I feel like this pilot has a lot of action and very little plot, which can be a problem depending on which direction the story goes. So this story is based off a webcomic, I believe, and it's very story focused. So I just find it a bit weird that it was so action heavy when we barely got to meet any of the side characters at the end. Also, the two main guy characters in this pilot had weird 180 character shifts where they just randomly became extremely violent, and I feel like we needed way more build up for that moment. Either way, I doubt I will continue to watch this if it ever does become a full show because it just really wasn't for me, and I ended up ranking this a C. So the next thing is a short film, and that's In a Heartbeat. This is a really cute short film. However, I think that at some point it's a bit too happy for me. I personally don't love stories that are extremely sweet like this, but I can see why other people like it so much. Overall, I think this is an okay short film. It just wasn't for me, and for that, I ranked it a C.
Okay, by the way, guys, I didn't write any notes for the shorts and pilots, and I feel like I really should have maybe thought a little bit about how I ranked these. I think I'm gonna have to move Has Been Hotel down to an F because I ranked In a Heartbeat a D, mostly because I was just kind of bored. Like, it was cute or whatever. I'm sure the short means a lot to a lot of little gay people, but it wasn't for me. Literally all this was like pure gay happiness, and that's all that was. And I think for a lot of people that's an amazing short. For me, it was sort of like a nothing sandwich. So yeah, I just gave it a D.
I 100% agree with you.
Our next one is Piece of Cake. I just think this was a fun short. The thing that I liked the most about this was the sound effects, just sort of the way they added the porcelain clinking noises whenever they would run or anything. The one thing I didn't like was the domestic abuse. Not a fan of that. And also one of the grooms was homophobic until he wasn't, and I just feel like he became not homophobic a little too late in the game. Something that we both liked was the 2D animation scenes that we got at the end, and I really liked that. And I think I mentioned that I sort of liked that more than the 3D animation we got in the beginning. So I would give it a C.
This is a really strong short film. The art style for the animation isn't really my thing. If I remember correctly, the characters are all glassy and porcelain, which I just wasn't the biggest fan of, but I think it's still really good looking overall. And I really love the ending as well, especially with the scene where the lesbian couple walks into the cake store and they see the two porcelain girls. I think they're like holding hands or something. And yeah, I just found that to be really sweet. I really liked it, and I gave this a B. Okay, the next one is a short film called The Problem with Valentine's Day. I remember having a lot of problems with this short film when I reviewed it. I can see why people like this short film, but the characters and the dialogue wasn't for me, and I think that's okay. Also, the ending made me really question things like, are these lesbians okay? So here's the thing, the ending ended with one of the characters being stood up by her date, and so she goes to the friend that liked her about it, and it made me question, like, is she only going back to this friend because she got rejected, or like is this actually supposed to be seen as like a romantic gesture or something? Because I don't know, it just felt a bit weird by the end. I wasn't a big fan of that. It really made me question things, so I gave this a C overall.
Yeah, I think surface level, this was a pretty good short film. I mean, and when you think more about it, yes, it's kind of messed up that she sort of defaults back to the other girl when she stood up. I just think this is sort of like, high school messy lesbians being high school messy lesbians. I wouldn't know because I have never been messy in my entire life, but I think it's an all right short film. I don't think there's anything necessarily to be upset about for me. I also really liked I forgot his name. He's like the gay best friend. Some of his lines were pretty funny. He was the comedic relief, and I liked the scenes we got with him. Yeah, I gave it a C. Our next one is The Amazing Digital Circus. I gave this a D. I mentioned that I do not like the animation. It was not nice on my eyes. There was a lot going on. It sort of felt like a PG version of Hell of a Boss, is I think the best way I can describe this. Oh my god, who's that one character we hate? The guy.
Jax.
Jax. I fucking hate Jax. And this is another situation where it is one character that ruins the whole thing. And I think that there are other characters that are actually pretty interesting. Although, after watching the second episode, I don't like Pomni. She is our main character, and I don't like her, which is a pretty big deal. I also don't like the plot because I feel like I know what's going on and I feel like I know what's going to happen, and I don't think I like it. I think it's a little predictable, maybe a little stupid, but that's just my opinion.
So this is another one where, like Hasbin Hotel, I kind of struggled with where I would rank it because I think I enjoyed the pilot itself. However, after watching episode 2, it really changed my opinion so far because I was a bit worried about what direction this show is going to go in the future after episode 2. So the pilot did become a full series, and I wasn't the biggest fan of episode 2. However, if I'm strictly talking about the pilot, I actually really like the pilot overall, though I do think there are some aspects about it that I did not like, especially when it came to Jax. I really loved the psychological horror aspect of the pilot. I hope Jax never gets redeemed. He is by far the worst character of all time.
But he is gonna be. Like, let's be
Yeah.
honest. Like, they're
Yeah.
gonna try and make him seem like a redeemable good guy. Like, oh guys, he's just mean and edgy because something happened to him.
Yeah, exactly. I just hope episode 3 proves me wrong about this show and that this show is worth watching, which Mal is nodding her head to say, no,
I
that's
don't think
probably
that's
not going
gonna
to happen.
happen. I don't think it's gonna happen.
Overall, I gave this a C so far. And the last pilot we're going to be talking about is Becky Prim. This pilot is pretty funny, and I was surprised when, spoilers, the main character ends up dying. I really did like this sudden twist. I think killing off a main character is really good, and I wish more people killed off their main characters. I also find it funny at the end she's still a ghost. Yeah, this is also kind of a bit of an edgy pilot. However, I feel like this is pretty tame compared to Hell of a Boss and Hazmat Hotel. And I think overall it's way better of an edginess than those two.
I think it has a lot to do with the fact that only one of these characters is super edgy. The other character, like the mean girl, she's just a bitch. Like, she's just a bitch, but she's not like edgy. But Becky is like, she's pretty fucking edgy.
Yeah.
But they're not throwing up edge.
Yeah, exactly. Because like in Has Been Hotel and Hell of a Boss, every character is edgy in there. And I feel like there needed to be more variety, and there's definitely more variety in Becky Prim. I also think the jokes really landed. I especially loved when Becky Prim ended up possessing that nerd character that liked her. It was really funny. And overall, I give this an A.
Yeah, this is also one of those pilots that I watched when I was a kid. So, you know, a little nostalgia. I loved everything about this. I loved the animation. I loved the variety of characters that we got. I think the premise was very interesting. What they were able to do with the characters was very interesting. And yeah, it's just a solid pilot. I gave it an A.
Is that
Okay.
everything?
Oh my gosh, that's everything.
Okay.
Happy
Anyways.
2 years.
Yeah, happy 2 years. Can you believe it's been 2 years already?
I can't.
Crazy.
I
And we're
simply
still
can't.
not famous. So make that happen, you guys.
We're still that. Guys, please share our podcast with other people. I promise we're gonna get better.
I promise we'll post more stuff.
Okay,
Well, actually,
well,
I don't.
maybe don't lie.
Yeah. Let's be honest here. Let's be real. But yeah, that's us ranking every short film and pilot we reviewed so far. If you want to send us a voice message on Spotify for podcasters, there'll be a link in the description to do so below. That's Instagram and Twitter that we're no longer going to be posting on because we're going to make a Bluesky. And we do have a TikTok. The TikTok is at the MidTakesPod and the Instagram is at MidTakesPod. I'll make sure to put those in the description. We also have a YouTube channel where we post some exclusive content. We've recently been posting a comic book club that we've called the Mediocre Monthly, and you can find that at the Mediocre Takes Podcast on YouTube. So be sure to check that out, and that's everything. So goodbye.